All right, welcome to Foundations in Pre-Cal 10. This is lesson 3 on the domain and range of discrete and continuous data. So we have had an introduction to domain and range. We know in general that domain is the x values of a relation and range is the y values of a relation. So we're just going to look at a few more specific scenarios, particularly those that involve continuous data, because there will be some new notation for you to learn. Okay, so when the data is discrete, that is the easiest case scenario. So we know that the domain, so we're going to go domain equals, and we're going to say that's my x values, okay? And then we just list the x values that are involved, because with discrete data, we just are making a list, okay? So basically you have these 4 points, you need the x values, and usually we work left to right, we take smallest to largest. So 1, 2, 4, and 5. Okay, because that is where we see that information. Okay, the range is the y values, and for the y values, we must look at the y-axis. Okay, and again, starting low, going high. This is at 1, this one's at 3, 4, and 5. So I've got 1, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. That is all there is to it for discrete data. Let's take a look at continuous data. All right, so for continuous data, it's a little bit more difficult because we can't just list the numbers because we need all the numbers in between. So for example, the x value isn't just 1, but it's also 1.2, 1.374695. It's everything in between. So we're going to look at a few different scenarios. For this one, we're going to look at a situation where we have a definite beginning and a definite endpoint. Okay, so if we look at our domain, first of all, so we know that our domain is going to be the x value. So we start every single domain and range like that. And then what we need to do is we need to go to our graph and look at the x-axis. So the x is the one that goes this way. Look at where does that information start and where does it end. Okay, so that's kind of our first job, is to look at this point and this point. Okay, so we can see that this is -7. And this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we know that the range goes in between -7 and 5 on the x-axis. So the way that we say that is we're going to use a double inequality, okay? So x is between a and b, these endpoints. Now, if you notice, there's a closed circle on one end and an open circle on the other. If you remember from grade 9, the closed circle means we include -7. The open circle means we do not include 5. Okay, so what we know is that every single domain question is going to start like the way we have it written, and it's all, for continuous data, it's going to end with, oops, sorry, a comma at the end. Just need to erase that. It's going to end with comma x as an element of the real numbers. Okay, so this is saying that's all numbers in between. What we need to do is we need to fill in this beginning spot, and it's going to, again, we just basically need to fill in these numbers, beginning and end. So if you always set it up this way, you'll work left to right. So the smallest number is -7, so we're going to include that there, and the largest number is 5. Now, the only thing that's wrong about this is that we are actually not including the 5. We want to include the 7, so this is x is greater than or equal to -7, but x is not less than or equal to 5, x is just less than 5. So we need to get rid of that equal sign from my inequality there. Okay, so there's my domain and range. We will set that up similarly. Okay, so the range is my y values, and it's going to end with y as an element to the reals. Notice that when we give this number set, we just use a double bar on our real numbers. So it's all the y values that are greater than or equal to a number, less than or equal to the number. So we want to now look on our y-axis and go, what's my smallest y value and what's my largest y value? Okay, so we can see that this smallest number is -3 and my largest number is 1. So it goes in between -3 and +1. Now again, we have to be careful because it doesn't actually include that point 1, because that's an open circle. So we need to get rid of the equal sign there. And it's just y is less than 1. So that's our domain and range. And if you can kind of like, I get it that it's new and it's maybe difficult, but keep in mind that really like the notation will stay the same all of the time. The only thing that's going to change are these numbers that you're going to put in, okay? Otherwise, they're going to look exactly the same. So that's for one that has 2 endpoints. Let's look now. This one has like it's going on forever in one of the directions. So we can look here and we see that it has an endpoint here, but it does not have an endpoint here. It just continues to go up and out forever in that direction. Okay, so again, domain, it's my x values, and it's going to end with x as an element of the reals. Okay, so now if we look at our x values on this graph, we can see that it starts here when x is 0, but this arrow means it continues on forever, so it doesn't end, right? So I just want all of the x values larger than 0, right? So then it's not going to be a double-ended inequality. It's just going to be x must be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, if there's no dot at all, assume that it's including the point 0. That closes it. Now my range. So range is y, and it's going to end with y as an element of the reals. Okay, and when we look at our y values, that's my up and down axis. So when does it start? It starts at 0. Okay, this is going to continue to go up forever. So it's all the y's that are greater than or equal to 0. Okay, let's look at this one. Quite similar. Okay, so my domain is all the x values. And I can come over here and put my ending on because I know that it's a line on my graph. It's not points, so it's going to end like that. So my x values, what x's are it? Okay, well, x is, my x goes this way, right? So if I look, these go out in both directions. So it really like is from negative infinity to positive infinity. It's anything, right? Because these would continue to go on and on and on forever. So really then my domain, there's nothing to put in here because there's no restrictions on that domain. It's all of the real numbers. So what I can do then is just move this in, close it over because I don't have any restrictions. This part right here normally is any restrictions that I have in domain that are not the real numbers. So I'm going to just move my ending point of my domain over, and that's what I have for a domain. Okay, so x is just all real numbers. The range, okay, so it's my y values. At the end here, y is an element of reals. And in this space, I put any restrictions on my range. So when I look, there's no graph down here in the negative y values. The graph is all up here in the positives. So I want to say that y can be any positive number. Like when I go to positive 5, I can find a graph. But when I go to negative 5, there's no graph there. So it's anything above the x-axis. So y is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, let's just do 2 more examples together. And then you can practice on some on your own. So in example number 1 here, this is discrete data. So these are our favorites because we just have to list the points. Okay, so it's the x values. And if you don't even put that part in, it's totally fine. So starting from my smallest x value, so my smallest point is here. So I've got one at -3, one at -2, 2 of them at 1, and one at 4. So I've got -3, -2, 1, and 4. That's all of my domain points. My range is all the values of y. So when I read my y values, I've got -4, -2, 0, 3, and 5. So -4, -2, 0, 3, and 5. Okay. And I don't have the all real numbers at the end because it's not all real numbers. It's only specifically those numbers. So my domain, and this one is my x values. So now it's a line, right? So I know then that it's going to end in x as an element of the reals. And in the middle, I want to put my restrictions on my x-axis. So it begins at -4, but it's not including -4. And it has an arrow on the end, which means it goes on forever in that direction. So I want all the x's that are greater than -4, right? So that means x's that are greater than -4. Not equal to because it's an open circle. And my range is my y values. So you look at the up and down movement of your graph. So like when does the graph start? Well, it starts at 1. And because of this arrow, this is going to keep going upward. So it's going to keep going up forever. So it's all y's that are greater than 1. And I know that y is an element of the reals because it is a, and my bracket there, because it is a filled in line, it's not discrete data. Okay, on the next page, I have several graphs for you to practice with. So I want you to go ahead and practice giving domain and range.